Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eczema Podcast. Today, I have a returning guest on the show. I'm so happy to bring him back because number one, he's pretty funny. And number two, he gave a lot of great information the first time. And a lot of you guys started implementing things that he talked about, and you guys found it very helpful. So I'm here to welcome back Dr. Matthew Zirwas, and he is an American board certified physician on the American Board of Dermatology. He's a nationally known expert who specializes in allergy patch testing and eczema as well. He is actually one of the few dermatologists who specialize in adult atopic dermatitis. There's a lot of dermatologists in the States, but very few actually specialize in adult atopic dermatitis. And he's been doing this for at least 20 years. He also founded the Bexley Dermatology Research Clinic in 2017, and the research clinic helps to qualify patients with the newest cutting edge treatment options. So, welcome back, Dr. Zirwas.
Thank you, Evie. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and today I have a list of things that we're going to cover. We're going to talk all about the latest supplements, some research on probiotic strains, patch testing, UV exposure, and how that affects your skin, Malassezia, what that is, and a lot of helpful things that you can hopefully take away and apply for your own healing journey as well. So, welcome, Dr. Zirwas. Glad to have you back again.
Thanks, Evie.
Yeah. And so last time you came on, you gave a lot of great information. You talked about some supplements. So today, I know we were going to start with talking about the latest research on probiotics and
Yep.
probiotic strains. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yep. So Evie, we've known for years. So it's probably been at least 10 years that some of the studies started coming out that suggested that probiotics could be beneficial for people with eczema. And it's really been an evolving area because number one, none of the studies were really what we would call high quality studies. And number two, you cannot say take a probiotic for eczema, because probiotic, when you say take a probiotic, that is the equivalent of saying get a pet, right? What do you mean? Do you mean a goldfish or do you mean a horse, right? And even if you say, well, you need to take this bacteria. Okay, well, that's a species of bacteria. Every species of bacteria has multiple different strains. That's analogous to saying get a dog. Well, does that mean because dogs are all the same species, but right, one strain of dog is a 2-pound teacup poodle. Another strain of the same species is a 140-pound, Rottweiler. And so we also knew you couldn't just say take a probiotic. Well, earlier this year, it might have been the end of 2021. Anyways, a study came out that was a very well done, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. And in the world of medicine, that is considered the gold standard. If you did a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, it works. Right now, if one of the things people often get caught up in is if there's not a randomized, placebo-controlled trial, that doesn't mean something doesn't work. It just means that when there's a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, we know for sure that it does. And so there's one of those trials done that really showed us exactly a mix of probiotics. So it was 4 different strains, and I can never remember the names of the strains, but I will tell you the exact product that I recommend in the US. And I have no connection with them. There's no, I've never talked to this company. I have no idea. But so the study came out using a mixture of 4 particular strains of probiotic, and they showed that it absolutely makes a difference in atopic dermatitis. The other thing that has been interesting, there have been some other trials done with other probiotics that have shown that they did not work, which is exactly what we would have expected, since we know that different probiotics do different things. Now, first, just so that people aren't on the edge of their seat waiting, the product that I recommend to all of my patients is from a brand called Now. So just NOW. It's on Amazon. Probiotic 10. 25 billion. And so it's probiotic 10 because there are 10 strains in there. It's 25 billion because there are 25 billion live bacteria in each capsule. And you take it once a day. important thing with probiotics, you have to take them with food. There's a lot of confusion around this. A lot of products say take on an empty stomach. I've even had pharmacists say take it on an empty stomach. Anybody who says take it on an empty stomach simply doesn't know what they're talking about. The research has been done. If you take a probiotic on an empty stomach, it does not survive into your intestines. You have to take it with food. And of course, that makes sense because, right, 50,000 years ago and 100,000 years ago and a million years ago when humans were evolving, where did the bacteria that makes your microbiome come from? Well, you picked up food off the ground and you ate it. And the bacteria was on there. So it's not like 50,000 years ago. It wasn't like they were scooping up bacteria and taking it on an empty stomach. It was always coming into your body with food. So that makes sense. So now here's what's fascinating about the probiotics and the eczema. It is one of the very first times that I have it has given me a legitimate answer to a really common question in adult eczema. Why did this happen? Why did I never had anything till I was 42. I never had anything until I was 27. I never had anything until I was 72. And we never had that answer. It's genetics and you're aging and maybe you got a virus and that. We didn't know. Now we can say with some degree of certainty. So the way I answer that question now when a patient asks me, so why does this happen now? Right. And this fits so well once you think about, right. So it is definitely your diet. It's definitely food that has triggered a lot of the immunologic overactivity that you're having. But it's not that you're allergic to any particular food. It's not that there's a food that, just stop eating corn. What it really is, all of the additives, the preservatives, the hormones, the antibiotics, the processing, the food dyes, the food all of those things have made the bacteria in your intestines out of balance. And at some point, yours got far enough out of balance that they started to make your immune system kind of go haywire. Now, I'm sure, and this is me talking to a patient, right? So I'm sure you have noticed that there are certain foods you eat that consistently will make your eczema get worse. Again, it's not that we think you're allergic to those foods. It's that we think of those foods as feeding the bad bacteria. And so causing more of this systemic inflammation that's coming from your immune system reacting to the bacteria in your intestines being out of balance. And so instead of trying to manage your eczema by avoiding foods, which, my experience over 20 years has been that it's really rare that I see somebody really get better long-term by avoiding certain foods. Instead, we're going to try and get your bacteria back into balance. And we're going to do that by you starting to take this probiotic. You're going to take it every day with food. I do think it's going to take a few months of taking it, maybe 3 months, 6 months, might even take 9. It's going to take a while because it took a while for your bacteria to get out of balance. It's going to take a while for you to see any difference. But it really is the one thing we can do where we're treating, in my mind, we're treating the cause of adult eczema. Right? We're no longer treating the symptoms. We're not putting creams on to make it itch less. We're not, giving you a drug to suppress the immune systems. We're actually treating the cause. And it's also super exciting. And in my Bexley Clinical Trial Center, we're doing actually a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial. We're part of a company that is developing the first prescription probiotic for atopic dermatitis. And it is just such an exciting time because now we really think we're getting to the cause, right? So now, and I really want to say that this does apply somewhat to kid eczema too, but kids with eczema, we know that it's such a big part of it is just genetics, right? Their skin barrier isn't strong enough. Their immune system genetically is primed to overreact. But in adults, we never really understood why, if you didn't get it as a kid, why would you get it for the first time whenever you're 40? And it's really just fascinating. But that probiotic, the now probiotic 10, 25 billion, it does have the exact same 4. So it has 10 strains in it. 4 of them are the exact same strains that were studied. I haven't been able to find a product available in North America that has the 4 strains specifically, just those 4 that were studied. It was a study done in Brazil. And Abby, if you want after the podcast, I assume you have a way you could post this.
Yeah, is it this one?
Yep, it's that one. And I can send you the research article. I know that your listeners are uber educated on eczema. It of course has lots of, as with all medical research articles, is full of medicalese and doctor speak. But I'm happy to send the article. And if you want to, if you have a website or somewhere you can put it, if anybody wants to look at the article.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll also put the link in the description so that you guys can check it out.
And yeah, I can never remember which of the 4 strains in here were the exact 4 that were studied. I think it was Bifidobacterium lactis, Lactobacillus casei, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and Lactobacillus paracasei. That's what I think were the 4 that were important. But I'd have to look at the article to remind myself exactly of which 4 it was.
Thank you. That's really interesting, though. I'm surprised that I've seen the Now brand a lot. I've used it a lot. I just didn't know that this one actually contains those strains that can help eczema, which I'm actually pretty surprised about.
I was so excited because, right, whenever you see a study like that, my first question is always, number one, is this available? Like, am I going to be able to get this for my patients? And then number 2, is it available at a reasonable cost? And right, the Now probiotic costs about $7 a month to be on. So 100 pills is like $25, right? So it's like 25 cents a day, I think, or something like that. It's really cheap to start taking it. And it's one of the things that we really think of. We can be addressing the cause of the eczema.
That's great. I love that. Do you remember if the study showed how long it takes to help?
I want to say I think it was about 3 months.
Okay.
And what I think I've seen in my patients is that I think it starts to make a difference in about 3 months. And I think it progressively keeps helping over time. Now, it's hard for me to say for sure, though, because usually, right, people who end up as my patients usually have horrible eczema. And so I'm putting them on, Dupixent or Adbry or Rinvoq to treat the symptoms quickly. And then I'm also putting them on the probiotic at the same time, kind of with the hope maybe this will allow us to get you off of drugs over time is kind of the way that I'm using it.
That makes sense. Someone also pointed out to me another probiotic. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but they said it was Florigen.
Have
And they
not.
said, let me try to
Have,
bring that one on the screen. They said that this one was also based on a research study. I haven't. I have to go back and check the research paper, but
wow.
that's what I've heard about this
I
one.
will. So, Abby, I will be looking this up later today. So I haven't heard
Sounds
of
good.
Florigen before. I'm a big fan of medical foods. So I frequently recommend medical foods for people who have circulation issues. But Florigen, haven't heard of before, but I am going to be researching it today. Because if there's more out there than anybody can, you can't know everything about
Yeah.
what's going on out there. So I haven't heard of Florigen before, but I'm going to be researching it today.
Sounds good. I love the probiotic now, though. So thank you for sharing that. So other things that we were going to move on to talking about was other types of natural dietary supplements that are out there that can help your skin. And I love that you're always so up to date on all these studies that are out there.
Yep. So there's one that I talked about last time that we've known about for a few years now called L-histidine. Just very quickly, again, that's an amino acid that provides your skin with the building blocks it needs to make a substance called natural moisturizing factor that holds water in your skin. We have very well done randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials showing that it makes a difference in eczema. The standard dose that was studied was 4,000 milligrams a day, and that's available on Amazon. Lots of different places that sell it. The one that's new that I've started recommending is actually an oral ceramide supplement. So, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are very familiar with the idea of ceramides. When we think about the natural protective oil on your skin that keeps the bad stuff out and keeps the water in, that natural protective oil is actually a very complex mixture of ceramides, which are the most important part of it, and cholesterol and free fatty acids. So we've had moisturizers, CeraVe in particular, and I do want to say I do work with CeraVe on conflict of interest, but we've had CeraVe for years now for putting ceramides on topically. But there is now an oral supplement that is a phytoceramide, so it's derived from wheat. The ingredient is called lipowheat, Lipowheat. It's not a particular product. So if you go on Amazon and search lipowheat, there are lots of different individual products out there that have lipowheat. It is also cheap, so it ends up being about $17 a month. I think, to be on it. And they have randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials, not in eczema in particular. They more looked at it for dry skin and wrinkle reduction, things like that. But the randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials in those states showed that it did make a difference. So the people who took the ceramide, their skin hydration, their skin appearance improved. So we knew that it did something. Now, I was always a little like, well, does it really, like, can you take are there really ceramide like going through your blood to your skin? So a study came out about a month ago now where they figured out a way to measure if there was ceramide in people's blood. And they showed that people with atopic dermatitis have much lower ceramide levels in their blood. People who don't have atopic dermatitis have higher levels of ceramide in their blood. So that kind of clinched the story for me that this supplement really makes sense as well and has really good science behind it. Like I said, it's called Lipo Wheat. And again, lots of different products on Amazon have it. I think the dose, and it's always the same dose. So it's the Lipo Wheat is a trademarked ingredient. And so any product that has Lipo Wheat is going to have the quality, the ingredient that you really want. Right. So I wouldn't take one that just said it has ceramides or phytoceramides or something like that. I want something that says it has Lipo Wheat, because that's the only one that I've seen good data for.
So I know last time when you came on, people were asking me about dosage. So I feel like people are going to ask, what dosage should they take?
Yeah. So again, the L-histidine, the studied dose has been 4,000 milligrams a day, which is much higher than the recommended dose on the products that you would buy. And then with the Lipo Wheat, the recommended dose is 350 milligrams of Lipo Wheat once a day. The L-histidine, I have people take it once a day. If people wanted to break it up into twice a day or 4 times a day, I don't think there'd be any harm in that. I think it's going to work just as well. It's just a matter of getting the 4,000 milligrams a day in.
That's great.
One thing about the L-histidine, it is sold as powders and as capsules, actually tablets, not capsules. I generally recommend the tablets just because the powder tastes terrible. When you no matter what you mix it into, it tastes terrible. The tablets are pretty decent sized tablets, but they don't taste bad, right? Because they're a tablet, you're not going to taste them. But so now if you're somebody who can't take pills or doesn't like to take pills, the powders are out there. You can mix them into whatever you want. But the pills are going to overcome the bad taste issue.
Thanks for the heads up. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that. So, the ceramides, you mentioned the Lipo Wheat. So, if people are sensitive to wheat or they have a they're gluten intolerant, can they still take it?
I don't know. They should be able to. Let me put it that way. So it should be impossible for. So whenever you're gluten sensitive, gluten is a protein. Whenever you're allergic to wheat, you're allergic to the protein in wheat. Protein should not be able to stay intact through the processing and putting into a product. So they should be able to take it, but that is, I absolutely don't. I haven't seen any data looking at, is there any wheat protein or any gluten that comes along with it? I don't know for sure.
Thanks for all the information. I just want to point out that I love that everything that you bring on the show, and whenever you bring all these supplements to, or you share about these supplements, they're always evidence based. You always back it up by research. So thank you for that.
Yes. And again, I have no connection with any of these companies. I specifically, even if they called me and said, will you be, I would be like, no, because then I would be like, I would not have credibility anymore. I am not recommending them because I make like a nickel every time somebody, but this is what I tell my patients to do.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Are there any other supplements before we move on?
Nothing else that I would say I recommend regularly. Nothing else that really comes to mind. No.
I think the only ones, if anyone wants to go back to listen to our previous podcast episode, the other ones you mentioned last time was melatonin and activated charcoal, but they can always go back and check out.
You know what? I forgot about melatonin. I do recommend melatonin all the time. There are several randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials showing that it helps with itch and sleep. Typically, I have people take, I think adults I have take 10 milligrams before bed. Kids I have take 3 milligrams before bed.
So after you shared about that, I had some people who were asking, is it bad if they take it long term?
I get asked that all the time. To my knowledge, no. When I've tried to look into this, I can't, because the question is, well, could your body become dependent on it? Right. So maybe your body will stop making its own natural melatonin because you're taking melatonin supplements. I have not been able to find anything that really gives me an answer to that. So I don't think there's a problem, but I don't know.
Hmm. And I appreciate you for sharing that too, because I think we're all still learning along the way, and just seeing what new research comes out as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we have one person who says, super interesting about ceramides for oral intake, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
I've already had several questions come in, which we will get to later once we get to those topics. But a lot of people seem to be enjoying what you are sharing so far. So let's move on to patch testing. So this is a
Yes.
super interesting one because this is what you specialize in. So yeah, let's talk all about patch testing, what it is, how can
Yep.
people get a hold of this?
Yep. So patch testing is called patch testing because literally the way that it started, this was about 100 years ago. And what patch testing is, we take a very pure single substance at a very specific concentration. We put it in this little metal disc. We put one drop on a little metal disc, and we tape that to your skin. We leave it on for 48 hours, and we take it off, and we look to, and then we have to wait another 48 hours after we take it off to see, do you get a reaction under that spot? Now, when we're doing this, we're usually testing 80, 90. So many dermatologists and allergists do a very limited patch testing that does 36 things. I would just phrase it, when you're getting real patch testing, you're getting patch testing that's anywhere from 80 to 150 individual substances. And those substances are going to be everything from ingredients in personal care products. That's probably the majority of them. Components of nail polish, artificial fingernails, metal items, rubber items, dyes in clothing, fabric finishes, things in laundry detergent, things, natural products, so botanicals. We're going to test it kind of a broad spectrum, and depending on where an individual has their eczema. So if somebody has it just on their face, for example, we have a specific extra ones that we test that are more commonly related to face. Whereas somebody who has it on their feet, I'm going to test things that are more related to shoes rather than things related to shampoo. So we individual, again, when you're getting real patch testing, it's individualized to the individual. So you come in, we put the tape. So typically it would happen like this. You come in on a Monday, we put the tape on. You can't get a shower, do anything that makes you sweat until Wednesday. Wednesday it comes off. And then on Friday you come back and we look to see those 100 things roughly that we put on your back. Are there, okay, oh, you've got a welt at number 37. Number 37 is this ingredient. And then we can give you an app to put on your phone that tells you what products are safe. So it will tell you it has roughly 10,000 products in it, and it will give you a list of all the ones that are confirmed not to have that ingredient. So that's the basic idea of patch testing. And now patch testing, we're looking more for contact dermatitis versus atopic dermatitis. And your listeners probably already have some concept of this difference. They probably have heard it from their dermatologist before. But the idea here, when you say the word eczema, that's like saying headache or stomach ache, right? It means you got a red itchy rash. The question then becomes, just like with a headache, well, is it a migraine headache? Is it a tension headache? Do you have a brain tumor? Like, what kind of a headache is it? So with eczema, the two main types are atopic dermatitis and contact dermatitis. Lots of people can have both, though. And so normally, contact dermatitis is more localized. So you're going to have it primarily on your eyelids, maybe. Or you're going to have it primarily on your hands. Or if you're allergic to nickel, you might have it below your belly button from belt buckles. Right? Depending or if you're allergic, some people are allergic to topical steroids. And if that's the case, you're going to put it on it's going to help initially, but then you're going to get worse because you're having an allergic reaction to ingredients in what you're putting on. Atopic dermatitis is usually less localized. So atopic dermatitis might be, you have it on your arms, you have, in the crooks of your elbows, you have it on your outer arms, it's on your back, it's on your thighs. It's just, it kind of moves around, could be kind of different areas. Now, the huge challenge that I have faced forever is that somebody comes in, they've had eczema for, we'll say 4 years, and I patch test them. And they're allergic to a few different ingredients in different products. And I go over with them what they're allergic to, what they need to avoid. And then maybe their eczema doesn't get better or only gets partway better. And then what we don't know is, well, is it that we didn't test everything and maybe there's something they're allergic to that we didn't test? Or maybe they think they're avoiding what we told them to avoid, but the app said to get, product X ultra moisturizing cream, and they got product X super moisturizing cream, which has different ingredients than the ultra moisturizing. And so they think they're avoiding, but so we never know. Is it that they really just have atopic dermatitis and they happen to have a positive test to these ingredients, but the ingredients are not actually causing their eczema? Right. And that has been a real challenge. And we actually didn't have a way. There was literally zero way to tell until Dupixent came out. So with Dupixent and Adbry, so Adbry is a competitor for Dupixent. It came out earlier this year, very, very similar to Dupixent in terms of how well it works, all those things. But those two, they work for atopic dermatitis, but they don't work for contact dermatitis. So I had all of these patients who I was like, I don't know if you've got atopic dermatitis or you still have contact dermatitis. And I put them on Dupixent or Adbry. 90% of them got better, which told me, it was atopic dermatitis. The positive patch test was just in medicine, we call it a red herring. So something that pointed us in the wrong direction. Now, 10% of them, they didn't get better with Dupixent or Adbry. And that told me, boy, this really does look like it's contact dermatitis. There's got to be something that we're still missing. And so that's because I often hear dermatologists like myself who do a lot of patch testing talk about, well, everybody needs to be patch tested. It's so much more contact dermatitis than we know. We need to avoid, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. But I really want people to understand, I've actually seen more problems from people being too focused on contact dermatitis, who they're changing their whole life. They're avoiding everything. They're eliminating, they're so limiting and restricting themselves. And they're still not getting better. Well, maybe even though you had a positive patch test, maybe it's not contact dermatitis. Maybe it is atopic dermatitis, and or maybe you had both. And so we find the contact dermatitis and you get 50% better. And you say, why can't I get the rest of the way back? Well, because it wasn't all contact dermatitis. Some of it was atopic dermatitis. And so and let me also just tell you the way that I talk to patients about this. So let's say somebody's referred to me. They've had a skin biopsy done. The skin biopsy said contact dermatitis, said favors contact dermatitis. But I see them and I said, you know what? I really don't think, I thought, well, what are you using? You know what? I don't think this is contact dermatitis. I think this is atopic dermatitis. And let me explain the difference. So, Mrs. Jones, your skin is supposed to look like this. And anything that gets on your skin can't get through and into your body. Your skin looks like this. And it looks like that because of your genetics, and just as people age, their skin gets less effective. And so that's letting stuff from your environment get through, and it's letting water get out. And the stuff that's getting in, your immune system's overreacting to it. Now, Mrs. Jones, I know the first thing you're going to think is, well, I'll get away from the things that are getting in, and then my immune system won't overreact anymore. Okay, we could try and do that. So, Mrs. Jones, here are the things I need you to stay away from for atopic dermatitis. You can't ever sweat. You can't ever be around any air pollution. You can't ever be around any pollen that might be in the air. You can't wear any clothes because the clothes are releasing dyes and fabric finishes, and there's residual laundry detergent in them. Oh, and you can't bathe in your shower anymore because we know that the calcium and magnesium and chlorine in your water are part of the things getting in and triggering it. So you're going to need to only bathe in freshwater streams and lakes, and you can't use any soap whenever you do that, by the way, either. Right. So if you can avoid all of that stuff, we can probably get you better. Right. Well, obviously you can't. Right. So that's the point I'm trying to get across to Mrs. Jones is you can't get eczema better by limiting and restricting your environment. It can help. Right. I'm not like, do whatever you want to. We want you to make sure you're using low allergenicity soaps that are mild. You're not taking 3 ultra hot showers a day. You're not, those kinds of things. But beyond those big things, you just can't get away from enough. So the stuff's getting in. And even if we were able to identify, here are the 4 things that are a problem for you, get away from them. Oh, we got your eczema got better. Your body, the gaps are still there, stuff's still getting in, and your body is just looking for anything to react to. So it's going to find something else to start reacting to. So you eliminate those 4, you get better for 3 months, 6 months, but then, I got away from that stuff. I haven't changed anything new and I got worse. Well, your body found something new to react to. Now we're going to start the whole process again. So you spend your whole life just trying to find more things to avoid, and it's just chasing your tail. We've got to be doing things like the probiotic, the supplements to try and strengthen the skin and close those gaps some. And then a lot of people really do need medications like Dupixent or Adbry. So there's some other ones out there now, Rinvoq and Sabinco. All of these companies I do work with, so I have conflicts of interest with all of these. But they really are stunningly effective drugs. I don't ever think of it as all we're going to do is do this drug. We're also going to do the other things to try and treat the cause. But I can get people so much relief so quickly with the medications that I hate to not do that in conjunction with the other stuff we're doing.
Yeah, and Dr. Zirwas, I really do appreciate how you're open to trying other alternatives as well. Like you mentioned, the other supplements or probiotics that you talked about too, which not a lot of dermatologists are open to.
Right, which it amazes me that they aren't open to it anymore, because people used to not be open to that stuff because there's no evidence. Well, now, if you don't recommend those things, you're a bad doctor. You're literally saying we have proof that this works, but because I learned in medical school that I'm supposed to use drugs, I'm not going to recommend anything that's not a drug. No, we have proof, right? We have proof. You cannot say we don't have any proof that we have proof.
Do you think the dermatology schools are ever going to be open to these the research that's coming out on supplements?
I don't know that the residency programs ever will. And that's really this isn't that they're like anti any of this. It's just that while you're a dermatology resident, you have 2,500 skin diseases you have to learn about. So it's hard to, as a resident, really get depth in any one skin disease. But I will tell you, I educate thousands of dermatologists. I lecture and speak to thousands of dermatologists every year. And every time I'm lecturing, I talk about this stuff. And so I know Dr. Leo is kind of doing the same thing. And so we're hoping to sort of get the specialty of dermatology turning that ship some, so that we do incorporate the natural things that are really looking at the cause of the disease rather than the drug. And the drugs work great. They are extremely safe, but right, they're not treating the cause. Right. And what people want is to treat the cause. Right. And I get that. And I'm so happy that now I at least have some things I can do that I can say, we are treating the cause. These supplements are strengthening your skin. They're closing this gap. The probiotic is supposed to decrease how much your immune system is overreacting to those things. Like we are doing what we can to try and treat the cause.
You're the first dermatologist I've ever heard that has said that the medications are only treating the symptoms, but we can do other things to treat the cause. So I think that's a really refreshing perspective to hear from a dermatologist.
No, it's what I'm always thinking. What would if I was the patient, right? If I woke up tomorrow with eczema, I wouldn't be thinking like, how can I cover up the? I mean, part of me is like, I just don't want to itch anymore. So I'd be like, whatever I could do. If you maybe not itch, great. But why did I get this? I want to eliminate the cause. That's what I would be thinking.
Yeah. And also, I'm sure other listeners here are just really thankful as well, because we've so many of us who have suffered from eczema have always wanted dermatologists who are open to new things and to new research like you shared about. And so it's nice that you're actually pioneering this I guess this research where you're sharing with other dermatologists so they can also in turn learn more about this as well. Because so many people who come on the show are always saying that they're so tired of seeing doctors who only give medication after medication, and they want another way out.
Yes. Just a couple of other things, and I haven't dug a whole lot into these, but we do have the one in particular that we have really good evidence around now is acupuncture as a treatment for atopic dermatitis, especially for the itch component. And there's also getting to be a little bit more research about medical hypnosis. Right now, both of those are, I don't know if I would call them treating the cause, but it really is a more holistic approach to trying to get people relief. And both of those have very reasonable evidence behind them. It's really hard to do a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial with acupuncture, right? Because like you either put the needle in or you don't. Some of the trials have been, well, we're supposed to put the needle here, and instead we're going to put it here. And they have shown when you put it in the right spot, people's itch gets better. And when you don't put it in the right spot, the itch doesn't get better. So we're getting better evidence around this stuff. But it's really interesting kind of understanding more of this. We now really think of it as this neuro immuno-intestinal axis where, right, I'm sure many of your listeners have kind of heard about the idea of the vagus nerve. And right, so we now know that when you look at, say, the tips of nerve endings in your skin, the inflammation, the immune system actually is concentrated right around the tips of the nerve endings. And so the nerve endings can activate the immune system, and the immune system can activate the nerve endings. And so we now get that there is much more rationale. We used to be like, well, you're just stressed, and your stress is making you more aware of your symptoms. And just, no, we now really understand that if you're under a lot of stress, those nerve endings are directly activating your immune system more, right? And we know that the intestinal bacteria are activating both your immune system and your nervous system and causing systemic inflammation. We're still just in the beginning phases of understanding all of this, but that is which means over the next 10 years, we're going to get better and better at it. And it really is just such an exciting time of getting to understand more of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to your patch testing, I know some people are going to ask the question on how is your patch testing different from, let's say, those allergy prick tests?
Yes, prick testing. So there are two different ways your immune system can react to something. So there's called a type 1 or immediate hypersensitivity. And then there's type 4 or delayed hypersensitivity. And fortunately, right, so 1's faster than 4 makes perfect sense. Prick testing, which is what allergists generally do, where they take the little needle and they'll usually do it on your back or your arms or whatever. That's looking for type 1 allergy or immediate allergy. Examples of that would be peanut allergy, shellfish allergy, allergy to pollen, where you get eyes and nose and mouth, those kinds of things. And in a very practical way, type 1 allergy generally happens to natural things, and it's generally very fast. So type 1 allergy, so natural, fast, and more affects mucosa. So mucosa means wet stuff. Your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your intestines. Really controversial if type 1 allergy and prick testing has a significant relationship to the skin. We just don't know. There's certainly been work around this. And the real thing with type 1 allergy, though, is if it's determined that you're allergic to pollen or dust mites or shellfish or peanuts or whatever, and you have eczema, will getting allergy shots to desensitize you help your eczema? And that is a really controversial topic. And part of the reason it's really controversial is that typically whenever you go in to get allergy shots, while you're getting the allergy shots, you're very likely to get side effects where your eczema will get worse. Now, the hope is what's going to get worse before it gets better. but might just get worse, and you may not get. So it's a really tough question. Whereas type 4 allergy, much more looking at allergy to what we would call man-made things. Now, not on right. So poison ivy is type 4 contact allergy. So you can have type 4 allergy to plants and things like that, but much more type 4 allergy is man-made things that are chemicals or synthetic, and it affects the skin, not the mucosa. So now, if you squirted something you were allergic to in your eye, I'm sure you would. But we generally think of patch testing and type 4 allergy being skin, prick testing and type 1 allergy being mucosa. Is kind of and many people with eczema, maybe even the majority, have both, right? So they've got rashes, plus they have allergies, sneezy, watery eye, and all that stuff. So many people need both, but that's kind of the difference between prick testing and patch testing.
And so when they test for the foods that you can be allergic to, I know that happens in prick testing. And do they do that in patch testing too, or mainly artificial?
To some extent, yes. So with patch testing, we're almost never testing to a particular food, but we are testing to substances that are components of many foods. So in particular, there's a substance called balsam of Peru that is an extract from a tree in South America, but it has about 200 different substances in this natural extract. And many of those substances are also in things like tomatoes, spices, and citrus. Those are kind of the big three. So if somebody's allergic to balsam of Peru, we actually give them a list of here are about 10 different types of food that could be an issue for you. Another common one is nickel. So, if you've ever been patch tested and you're allergic to nickel, there's between a 1 in 100 and 1 in 10 chance that foods that contain nickel could be making your eczema worse. Now, the real challenge there is that the foods that contain nickel, all plants. So any plant depends on the soil that it was grown in. Now, some plants almost always have a lot of nickel, things like legumes, chocolate in particular, oats as well. But any food, so broccoli is normally sort of a low nickel food, but if I grew broccoli in high nickel soil, then the broccoli would be high nickel also. So the nickel avoidance is really tough because we're almost telling people, eat an unhealthy diet, stick to processed foods and meat, right? Which is, I don't know, right? So it's tough, right? And then the other one that's a relatively common one is a chemical called propylene glycol. So propylene glycol is an ingredient in most prescription creams, whether they're steroid creams, non-steroid creams, acne creams, whatever. Most creams, not all, but most, probably 60, 70% have propylene glycol in them. Well, any food that is like a cream, so icings, sauces, glazes, things like that will often have propylene glycol in them to make the consistency and the kind of the feel of it in your mouth and on the food right. And so if you're allergic to propylene glycol, consuming those things, again, can trigger your eczema to get worse.
That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing all of that. So in your practice, do you recommend people to get both prick testing and patch testing?
Normally, if people ask me about prick testing, so I don't recommend either of them across the board. If I'm looking at someone and thinking that the places where they consistently are getting eczema are consistent with contact dermatitis, or they're using products that I know are big problems, right? So let's say, for example, somebody's using Bath and Body Works cinnamon, lavender, peppermint, pumpkin spice body wash. I'm going to say, you know what? Probably going to stop that. Let's have you switch over to some Cetaphil or CeraVe or Vanicream or something like that, and we'll see if you get better. Right? So I'm thinking about. But I'll recommend contact derm patch testing depending on where they're consistently getting eczema. I generally only recommend prick testing if they're getting a lot of mucosal symptoms, because I have not seen. I could think of 2 patients in 20 years who really their eczema got a lot better with prick testing and allergen desensitization. I could think of many, many more who got prick tested, started desensitization, and their eczema just got much, much worse. Now, maybe if they had stuck with the desensitization for 5 years, it would have eventually but they couldn't put up with the worsening of their eczema for 5 years, so they stopped the desensitization shots.
That's so interesting. So same for babies as well?
Babies. So first I want to put out there, I try as much as I can to avoid taking care of kids, just because it's hard. All right. I feel bad for them. Like I feel bad for the kids, and I deal with that by saying, well, go to the pediatric dermatologist. The literature out there really says kids with eczema who are younger than 5, there's a good chance that food allergy might be driving their eczema. Now, food allergy tends to go away as people get older. And one of the traps that I'll often see people fall into is you get prick tested and you're allergic to these 9 foods. And so you start avoiding all 9 foods and you don't get any better. So then, well, maybe the foods are contaminated at the factory and maybe people could. The vast majority of the time in adults, food allergy has nothing to do with their eczema. So they could have, if people went on a diet where they ate nothing but turkey, white rice, butter, salt, and water, consume nothing else for a year, they still wouldn't get better because the food allergy is not driving the eczema in the vast majority of adults. Second, in kids, it's a really interesting thing. So there's a lot of people who think that contact dermatitis is way underdiagnosed in kids. I actually believe it's way overdiagnosed in kids, that we're seeing a lot of kids who get patch test positivity, but then whenever they avoid the things they're allergic to, we don't see them get better. Absolutely. I've seen lots of kids who do. So I'm not like, oh, that's never but I see it much more happen in the other direction where, the family has been, driving themselves crazy, trying to avoid everything, wondering what they're missing. And really it's not contact dermatitis. Avoiding things isn't going to happen. It really is just atopic dermatitis that needs to be addressed.
And I've also heard of cases where there can actually be false positives as well.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't, and it's really hard to distinguish between, so what a false positive means is you had a positive test, but you're not really allergic to it. Then there's the case of you had a positive test, you really are allergic to it, but it's not causing any problems. And then there's the third situation, you had a positive test, you are allergic to it, and it is causing the problem. 1 and 2 are really hard to ferret out and figure out, was it a false positive test or was it you truly are allergic, it's just not causing any problems? And if somebody's wondering, well, how could you be allergic to something and it's not causing problems? Remember, when we're doing the patch test, it's very artificial, right? So we're putting the substance on your skin, we're holding it on your skin for 48 hours under a little metal disc, right? That's very different than you wash your body with it, right? So it really, where it's on your skin for 30 seconds and it's not occluded at all. So you can have an immune system that is able to react to a given substance, but it may not react to it under normal circumstances.
So what do you usually get people to do? Do you get them to retest it or avoid the substance?
In today's world, honestly, if I test people and they avoid and they don't get better, I typically will put them on Dupixent or Adbry, and I tell them we are doing this to find out. So if you get better on the Dupixent or Adbry, then avoiding stuff is not the issue. It's not that it was a false positive, false negative test. If they don't get better, then I'm saying, you know what, that patch test probably was a true positive, and we need to figure out what we're missing.
That's so interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So I know we were also going to talk about Malassezia because I'm sure not a lot of other people.
You know what, Abby, I've got all the time. You know what? I'm having such a good time. I told you 4 o'clock. We can go as long. I do have a hard cutoff at 5.
Okay.
But we keep going as long as you want to.
Sure. That's so kind of you. I love how you have dedicated your time to this and your energy and research as well. So we really appreciate you. So any last things you want to add before we move on to Malassezia?
One more thing about causes of eczema. So this is highly controversial. It's something that I believe very firmly, though. So it goes back to vitamin D. So there are lots of studies showing that people with eczema are vitamin D deficient compared to everybody else. And so there are lots of studies now that have looked at, does giving vitamin D supplementation help with eczema? And those studies have pretty conclusively shown no. taking all the vitamin D in the world does nothing. The interesting part here, though, is about 3 years ago, somebody was doing one of those studies to look at vitamin D supplementation in infants. So they were looking at if we take newborns who have a high risk of eczema because they have parents with eczema, and start before day 30 of life, we start giving them vitamin D supplements. And we're going to randomize. We're going to give half of them vitamin D, half of them we're going to give placebo drops. We're going to see who gets eczema. So first, that study proved that vitamin D doesn't do anything. It was more proof that vitamin D doesn't do anything. The interesting part, though, so sunlight makes your body create vitamin D. And so as part of the study, they had the babies wear what are called UV dosimeters that measure how much sun exposure they got. What they found in that study was that sun exposure was by far the strongest predictor ever found for whether or not a kid is going to get eczema. So the more sun that kids got, the less eczema they got, right? And so now when I read that, and then I think back on when did the eczema epidemic, where we see so many more people with eczema nowadays, start? It started right around the same time that it was discovered or really understood that sun burns are a cause of melanoma. And we started telling parents, oh, your child should never be outside in unprotected sun. They should always have sunscreen on. They should be in the shade. They should get no sun at all, no unprotected sun. That way we're going to prevent skin cancer later in life. So first, we have no proof that that's true. We have zero proof that avoiding sun as a child prevents skin cancer later in life. Zero proof on that. That was people. We still make that recommendation. Well, not me. Other dermatologists still make that recommendation all the time. What this study showed me is that it may be that the cause of the eczema epidemic has been not that there's some new chemical that kids, some new chemical or artificial thing, or the kids are getting exposed. It's not phthalates, or it's not good. It's really that we've taken away a natural thing that your body needs. And because we know that sunlight directly affects the immune system in your skin, and it directly affects your blood, and it directly affects how strong your skin barrier is. And so everything that sunlight does for your body is anti-eczema and anti-allergy. And so I now tell my patients who have eczema, when they have kids, make sure that your child gets as much unprotected sun as you can possibly have them get, starting from birth. And now you want to make absolutely sure they don't get a sunburn. Sunburns are just bad. Sunburns are a sign that you've overdosed on sun. So you never want to get a sunburn, but as much unprotected sun exposure as they can is the best protective, in my opinion, by far the best way that we have to protect a child from getting eczema.
I love that you shared that. And the first time I heard about that was actually from Dr. Silverberg, who we interviewed before and that you're friends with. And he shared something similar to that as well.
And it really is, it makes sense. And we've known, for decades, one of the ways we treat eczema in adults is to put them in essentially a medical tanning bed, right? So we know that ultraviolet light is good for eczema. It really was learning, oh my gosh, ultraviolet light is good for preventing eczema. Because something else, just in case it is something else that comes up a lot, there are a lot of dermatologists who believe that if we use moisturizer on babies before they get eczema, that can prevent eczema. It has been proven that that is wrong. So putting moisturizer on babies before they get eczema, actually, in the best study that's looked at this, the kids who they started putting moisturizer on had worse outcomes than the kids who didn't get moisturizer. And so it always still fascinates me whenever people tell people with eczema, make sure you're moisturizing your baby. No, the data has really been, no, we cannot. That's, if anything, probably going to make your kid more likely to get eczema or more likely to get skin infections. So we know moisturizing isn't the issue. Another one that's common is the hygiene hypothesis. We're too clean. Kids aren't getting exposure to enough dirt. They're not getting enough germs. That has been proven wrong. We know the hygiene hypothesis is incorrect. But the things that led to the hygiene hypothesis were the understanding that kids who grew up on farms were less likely to get eczema than kids who grew up in cities. So kids on farms certainly get more exposure to dirt than the kids who grew up in cities. But I wonder if there's anything else they get more exposure to. Say something like being outside in the sun. Right? So the ultraviolet hypothesis is a much better explanation for why we see more eczema in kids in cities compared to kids who grew up rurally. And it also, I think, part of what has contributed to the eczema epidemic is just changes in lifestyle. That, right, all of us are spending less time outside, and so therefore our children are spending less time outside than 50 years ago. So it's really a fascinating space. Really fascinating.
After I did that interview with Dr. Silverberg, I started looking into the research, and I saw that there were some studies that showed that babies born in spring and summer had less
Yes.
prevalence of eczema compared to those born in winter.
Yep, that's another big part of it. That the data that kind of leads to this conclusion, and it's going to be it's really interesting because it's a really hard. So whenever I talk about this so I'll sometimes talk about this in to a group of 200 dermatologists, and people will come up and say, "Well, how do you know it's the sun? Sun's just bad. It causes skin cancer. We shouldn't be telling. How do you know it's sun? Maybe it's just being outside." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's possible that it's just being outside but." How would that work? And none of the data has shown this. And how would that explain why the kids with the UV dosimeter got it? Dermatologists are so anti-sun that they just, as soon as you say the word sun might have some kind of a benefit, it is like, oh my God, you just called my mortal enemy, the thing that I hate more than anything in the world. You just said it's good. Therefore, I am not going to listen to anything you have to say. That's kind of the response that I get from most dermatologists whenever I bring this up, rather than an open-minded response of, well, I know if you get like sun for 50 years over your whole life, it certainly can lead to more skin cancer. But yeah, maybe a little bit of sun whenever you're a baby is protective. That is very rare that I ever get that response from a dermatologist.
That is so interesting. So I started sharing about that too, about how the sun can be helpful after that interview with Dr. Silverberg, and people were just saying that, how can you say that it can cause skin cancer and all that stuff. So it must be the media.
It's the media, and it is also, and I hate to put it this way, but sunscreen companies donate massive amounts of money to the American Academy of Dermatology, like millions and millions and millions of dollars. Now, do I think there's anybody at the American Academy of Dermatology who is saying, oh, well, we know sun is good for people, but we need that sunscreen money, so we're going to lie and say that it's... No, they certainly, we know that sun causes skin cancer. I'm not like, oh, everybody should be getting on it. But again, it just, the alliances that have been built over decades, people are very biased and have really bought into the anti-sun thing. Now I'm going to, so this is off the topic of eczema, but I still just have to, there's research out of Sweden. Now, Sweden, you got to remember, much less sun than America. All right. So very far north. There's research out of Sweden that says the people who get the most, so this was a 20-year study done in 30,000 women. And they showed that the women who got the most sun had half the risk of dying as the women who got the least sun. And they actually showed that avoiding sun as an adult had the same effect on health as if you took up smoking. Avoiding sun was just as bad as smoking. And we now believe that that's mainly because sun, so right, if you think about, sun penetrates about half of an inch into your body. Your blood circulates to within about a 32nd of an inch of the surface. And so when you get sun, you're getting sun to your blood even more than you're getting it to your skin. And that actually is extremely protective against heart attacks and strokes. It's also very good for your immune system. So it prevents autoimmune disease and multiple different autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes. There are all these benefits of sun. And the reason why we don't talk about this, and we don't, because whenever I bring that study up, it again comes back to, well, but the people getting sun were probably outside more. So they were getting more exercise. How do you know it was the sun? And my answer is kind of, well, I don't know that it was the sun, but the data sure says that it looks like it was the sun. And it really, but so it's obvious. Nobody on earth would argue that sun doesn't cause skin cancer. But the argument that I make is, if we eliminated every death from skin cancer, so not a single person in the entire world died of skin cancer because everybody avoided sun completely, we would have many, 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 many more people who died because they weren't getting the benefits of sun. So it's, even though sun directly causes skin, I often use the analogy, dermatologists telling people to avoid sun would be like orthopedic surgeons telling people not to exercise. Hey, you know, if you don't exercise, you're never going to, you're never going to tear a ligament in your knee. You're never going to, well, yeah, but you're going to die of a heart attack or a stroke because exercise is good for you, right? Yes, sun has benefits, but I'm a firm believer that sun has risks, but I'm a really firm believer that the overall benefits of sun far outweigh the risk. But all right, now sorry, that was my soapbox. I get off of it now, and we go back to talking about eczema.
I know. I like how you actually flip that around. It gives us a different perspective to think about it.
Yes.
So I actually looked into vitamin D research before in the past, and I did see a lot of controversy. How there were some studies that showed that low vitamin D is linked to higher severity, whereas some were contradicting it. So that's just something interesting.
And I agree with that completely. So I would agree completely that low vitamin D is linked to worse eczema, but numerous studies have looked at does taking vitamin D supplements help eczema? Conclusively proven it does not. And so I believe that low vitamin D is actually a marker that you're not getting enough sun, right? So it's not that you're not eating enough vitamin D. It is that it's just an unrelated, happens to be a good marker to show, are you getting enough sun to keep your body healthy?
Interesting. Yeah, and last time when I interviewed Dr. Silverberg, he mentioned something about the states, how the southern parts of the states had like a 20 to 30% reduction in eczema because there's more sun compared to the northern parts of the states.
Absolutely true. So both the season of birth, how far, this latitudinal gradient, where the farther north you get. We also actually think it may be why people with darker skin tones are often have higher prevalences of eczema, because the same amount of sun has a bigger effect on somebody with lighter skin tones than somebody with darker skin tones. There's a guy in the UK named Richard Weller, who is a dermatologist, I think at the University of Edinburgh, who this is his primary area of interest, is like showing that sun has really meaningful benefits. And I've had several conversations with him just because once I came across his research, I was like, this is he's the guy like doing the research. He's and he more focuses on the cardiovascular benefits of sun. So the prevention of heart attacks and strokes. But there are lots of these longitudinal gradients that really make it hard to think. Now, again, so somebody who's anti-sun would say, well, it's just that people who live in southern states, it's nice more of the year, so they're outside being more physically active, and that's why their eczema is better, right? So people all can come up with all kinds of rationale to allow them to continue to ignore it, but the evidence is really clear. The evidence is really clear.
I'm loving all these theories and patterns on like season of birth and location. It's so interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. And it's why a lot of people with eczema, if they were to move somewhere, Arizona or Florida, where there's tons of sun, and without trying, they're just going to get, I see people all the time who have moved to Ohio from sunny places say, oh, my eczema just got so much worse since I moved to Ohio. And, I'm not going to be like, move back to the sunny area. I will say, well, it might be that there's less sun here. But it's a really interesting thing.
That's interesting. I remember one time when I was in a flare, at one point, I don't know if you can tell, but at one point I was like 95% covered in rashes after I gave birth. And it was one of my hardest times. But after giving birth, I couldn't tolerate being in the sun that long. Like my skin would just flare after a few minutes.
Yes.
And I feel like now that I've healed so much, I can finally be in the sun longer.
Yes. And that is while somebody's in the middle of a flare. Yes. The skin is just so reactive that you can't really but it's while you're doing well that getting sun the hope is it's going to really help prevent the next flare. So yes, I agree with that completely. Why? And part of why we see that happen, right? There's really good evidence that in people with atopic dermatitis, their own sweat makes their atopic dermatitis worse. That's why I mentioned that earlier. It is actually true. So people who give a history, who say, oh, if I exercise or I get hot and I start to sweat, I immediately get itchy, or I'm allergic to my own sweat. When I was a resident, I remember a patient saying that, coming out, telling my supervising dermatologist that, and they laughed at me and were like, "You really think you could be allergic to your own sweat? That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Well, since then, the evidence has come out proving conclusively that yes, if you collect their sweat and you prick test them against it, they will have a positive prick test against their own sweat. So they are allergic. Now, it's not actually the sweat that they're allergic to. It is actually Malassezia. And so Malassezia is a natural yeast that lives on everybody's skin. But a lot of people with eczema become allergic to it. And so what happens so now you essentially are allergic to your own skin because this Malassezia, you cannot eliminate it from your skin. But when you sweat, it actually activates the allergens from the Malassezia. That's what you're actually allergic to, is the Malassezia, not the sweat itself. But the sweat is what is activating the Malassezia and allowing it to trigger the itching and the reaction.
That's so interesting. Someone just told me like yesterday actually that every time they sweat when they exercise, they get like a rash on their chest.
Yes, it's absolutely, and that is, allergy to your own sweat is a very, very real thing, and it's much more common than anybody realizes. But the problem is, well, what do you do about it, right? You tell, don't sweat, right? Don't ever exercise again. You can't tell people don't ever exercise again. So it is one of those things that's fascinating. And the most useful part is that it helps for me to reinforce to patients, no, you are not crazy. You're not like, because other doctors, you're not allergic to your own sweat. No, you actually are. You were right. You know your own body. You're allergic to your own sweat. I don't know what to do to help, but you are allergic to your own sweat. That is true.
I had to go down a Google rabbit hole one time and search. I found all these searches, like search results that came up, like exercise induced hives, exercise induced
Yes.
shrimp allergy.
And so and I will say there is a different thing called cholinergic urticaria, where it's actually when your body temperature goes up. So when your core body temperature goes up, so those people usually won't get a problem from being in a hot environment. That's kind of how you clinically tell them apart. So if you have cholinergic urticaria, sweating won't be a problem if you're just in a hot room because your core body temperature doesn't go up. But whenever you exercise, your core body temperature goes up, and the heat is actually what you're allergic to. So the heat is causing your histamine to be released. And so that's how I try and differentiate between the two when I get that history of, oh, sweating makes me itch and I get this rash. Well, is it only sweating when you exercise that does it? Or is it sweating because you're just in a warm environment? Because the two tell me two different things.
I'm loving all these new things that you're sharing, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are they can probably relate to it because a lot of them have very similar symptoms.
Yeah, it's really common in eczema for people to have this sweat reactivity, and it really is fascinating that it truly is an allergy to the sweat.
Yeah, and I actually like how we transitioned into Malassezia as well, because there's a lot to talk about it. I actually have some questions that came up from other people about Malassezia, but I know that it also plays a role in seborrheic dermatitis, and I'll let you share in case there's other things as well.
Yep. So with Malassezia, so Malassezia is a natural yeast, lives on everyone's body. So you cannot be a human being and not have this living on your skin. Its food source is a particular type of skin lipid called sebum. Now, sebum is normal. So if you get an oily nose, that's sebum, right? That's a specific type of skin oil, and certain parts of your body make more sebum than others. Your scalp makes a lot, your face makes a lot, your upper chest and your back. So think about areas where teenagers are prone to getting acne. Acne is also related to sebum. But anywhere that teenagers are prone to get acne, everyone has Malassezia living on their body. Now, there's two different types of problem that Malassezia causes. So number one, if you have a particular type of immune reaction to Malassezia called a Th17 reaction, you will get seborrheic dermatitis. So dandruff is the sort of most common, mildest form of seborrheic dermatitis, but it can show up in the folds of your nose, this part of your forehead, commonly shows up behind the ears, can show up anywhere on your face or your upper body, but those are the really common areas. And it's red and flaky, looks a little bit greasy, and it can be itchy. It's not itchy like eczema is itchy, but it can be itchy. So that's if you have this Th17 reaction to Malassezia. If you have more of a type 1 reactivity, what we talked about earlier, where people actually have IgE, which is an antibody that your body makes that drives allergic reactions. If they have IgE that specifically attacks and binds to Malassezia, then they will get atopic dermatitis that is triggered by the Malassezia. And so this is a type of atopic dermatitis called head and neck atopic dermatitis, where the most classic picture is if you kind of took a line and went like that, and from there up, your eczema is much worse than anywhere else on your body. That is the way that this looks in a given individual that really tells us Malassezia is playing a big role. And in those individuals, historically, the only thing that helped at all were anti-yeast treatments. And in particular, I would recommend an oral one called itraconazole, which is the research on it has been that is by far what works the best. Now, if you don't have the head and neck type of atopic dermatitis, itraconazole does nothing for your eczema at all. It only helps if the Malassezia, so this itraconazole is an anti-Malassezia antibiotic, that would work. Now, the other place where this has gotten fascinating recently, I'm sure you're very familiar with Dupixent. The most common meaningful side effect from Dupixent is called Dupixent-induced facial erythema. So we call it DFR for short. And it can be either you had normal eczema and over the rest of your body, you went on Dupixent, that all got better, but now you suddenly got eczema for the first time on your face. Or it could be you had it on your face and the rest of your body got better, but your face didn't. Either one of those can be what we call DFR, dupilumab or Dupixent facial redness. What has been determined, so initially people were really, this could be rosacea, it could be Demodex, it could be contact dermatitis. The data has come out now. It is in the vast majority of cases, probably 90% at least, it is that the Dupixent actually allows your body to start reacting to Malassezia. So that I mentioned earlier that you've got this Th17 type reaction that is what causes seborrheic dermatitis. Well, people with eczema, their body is overproducing a particular cytokine, which is cytokines are how your immune cells talk to each other. They're a chemical that your immune cells release to talk to each other. And there are probably hundreds of different cytokines. But Dupixent blocks two cytokines, IL-13 and IL-4. And it turns out IL-4 actually prevents Th17 reactions. And so it's reasonable to say your eczema was preventing you from getting seborrheic dermatitis. Well, whenever we block because the IL-4 that was part of your eczema was blocking the seborrheic dermatitis. When we block the IL-4 with Dupixent, now we elect somebody who would have gotten seborrheic dermatitis long, long ago. They'll get it for the first time after they start the Dupixent because now the IL-4 isn't protecting them from it anymore. That figuring that whole story out has been really, again, just fascinating because when we first started to see this, I thought it was going to be rosacea and Demodex. I didn't think it was going to be Malassezia. I was wrong. It's Malassezia is the driving factor in this. And if any of our listeners or viewers have the dupilumab facial erythema, the evidence is, again, the itraconazole that I talked about before, that's an anti-Malassezia antibiotic, is about the only thing that really works. I have seen a number of patients. So the difference between Dupixent and Adbry, which are two competitors, the Dupixent blocks both IL-13 and IL-4. The Adbry only blocks IL-13. Now, that leads to the Dupixent, because it's blocking both, works faster than the Adbry does and might work a little bit better. The Adbry works slower, and it may or may not work quite as well as Dupixent. We don't really know yet for sure, but it definitely works slower. But because the Adbry is not blocking the IL-4, I've had a number of patients who had the dupilumab facial redness that we switched from Dupixent to Adbry, and it went away. So those are really the two. So if anybody out there is listening has this dupilumab facial redness, talk to your dermatologist about this. Those have really been the two things that have been shown to have some effectiveness in it. But it really, we're learning more and more about the role and Malassezia role in atopic dermatitis. Right, Malassezia is part of your cutaneous microbiome, and so whenever we talk about microbiome, we're usually talking about the bacteria that live in your intestines. Right, and the probiotics, which is really what we're talking about with the microbiome. You also have the skin microbiome, and we know that it's abnormal in eczema, but that's not a cause of eczema, that's a result of eczema. But the Malassezia is normal microbiome. It's just that people with eczema have an abnormal reaction to the normal microbiome.
Got it. Yeah. And one time I also heard a dermatologist share that you can even put like anti-dandruff shampoo and use that as a cleanser on your face if you have it there.
Absolutely. And I will tell you what I recommend to a lot of eczema patients, actually my favorite soap for eczema patients now, as we've understood more and more about Malassezia, I recommend a soap called Noble Formula, Noble formula, which has an active ingredient called zinc pyrithione, which is the active ingredient in most dandruff shampoos. And I have them just use that as their body wash every day, especially for their face, neck and chest. The rest of their body, I'm not so worried about. But actually, that has a higher concentration of the zinc pyrithione than does dandruff shampoo.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, usually I've only seen like 2% for zinc pyrithione.
Yes, so most dandruff shampoos are 1% zinc pyrithione. You can find a couple that are 2% zinc pyrithione, but the Noble Formula bar soap, which you can get on Amazon, I think it's about $11 for a bar. It has 2% zinc pyrithione. It also has, I think, emu oil in it, which I have no idea if that does any good or not. Sounds good, but I've never seen any evidence that says emu oil does anything. Not saying it doesn't, right? Because remember I said at the beginning, just because we don't have a double-blind randomized double-blind doesn't mean it doesn't do anything. It just means I don't have any proof that it does do anything. Zinc pyrithione, we also don't have any proof, but it's cheap, and we know Malassezia plays a role, and we know zinc pyrithione works against Malassezia.
I had one question that came in. Someone asked, they said they're so thankful for this live, and they said, I've read research about how Malassezia can metabolize lipid oils with a carbon chain length between 12 to 24. In contrast, they can't feed on medium chain fatty acids with 6 to 10 carbon atoms. So they said, I've tested this, and this is the only oil that doesn't trigger my skin, but it's expensive. And they said, do you have an alternative suggestion to keep the skin hydrated and avoid transepidermal water loss?
Okay, so first I want to say, if a dermatologist asked me that question, I would be like, wow, you really, 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 really know a lot about Malassezia and skin physiology. So first, I agree with all of that. And just one other interesting point of it, another problem with Malassezia is that when it feeds on those longer chain hydrocarbons, it breaks them down into fatty acids that are irritating to the skin as well. I usually don't talk a whole lot about that aspect of it because my opinion is that the immunologic part is a bigger deal. But it's just also, I think it does play a role also there. Coconut oil. So the biggest unique thing about coconut oil is that coconut oil has predominantly medium chain triglycerides. And it's why I have a lot of patients. I recommend coconut oil regularly. There are 2 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials showing that coconut oil works better than what I would call artificial oils like mineral oil or petrolatum. The biggest thing with coconut oil, it has to be cold-pressed, unrefined coconut oil. because as soon as coconut oil gets heated up or refined, the medium chain triglycerides break down. And the medium chain triglycerides have benefit because, number one, they don't feed the Malassezia. And number two, medium chain triglycerides are anti-inflammatory and anti-staphylococcal. So they reduce the amount of staph on the skin. And it also goes back to why I when people do ask me about natural oils they can use on their skin, the one natural oil that people with eczema should always avoid is olive oil. So olive oil actually is, if you try and culture Malassezia, olive oil is the best. It supports the growth of Malassezia better than anything else out there. And so I always make sure that I tell eczema patients, don't use olive oil.
And I read research that it breaks down the skin barrier, and
Yep.
sunflower oil seems to do a lot better than the olive oil.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So my favorites, sunflower oil. Can't believe I'm blanking on this. Sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, and apricot oil. Grapeseed oil and apricot oil. There's some basic science around all of these. I haven't seen any great. There's no randomized. Because nobody's going to pay. There's not like some apricot oil company out there that's going to spend millions of dollars to do the study. But those are the three oils that I generally recommend. One other natural thing that's just interesting. There was one study, and this was with a particular cream that's made in Iran, but the main idea was it was a mixture of, and I think they actually used olive oil, about a 1-to-1 mix of olive oil and aloe. And I have had a number of patients that instead of had them mix together either sunflower seed oil or the other ones that I talked about, grapeseed oil, apricot oil, 1-to-1 mixture with aloe. And you can buy, and you can't use like aloe gel. It has to be pretty much 100% pure aloe, which you can get on Amazon. And I'll have them just mix the two together. Now they separate out. So, right, just like micellar water does. So before you put it on, you have to shake it up and then you put it on. But there was a study out of Iran that said that mixture was just as effective as a topical steroid. And so again, for people who want natural treatments, which is a very reasonable thing to want, that's one of the things that actually has some good evidence behind it, is a mixture of a natural oil together with aloe.
That's so interesting, because I have met some other people before who have mentioned to remove all oils in general because the Malassezia feeds on it.
It's a really interesting question of which oils, and we know that it's more the longer chain. I can't think of a single patient that I've ever had say that coconut oil triggered a flare of, say, seborrheic dermatitis or anything else. But that's usually the one that I recommend in this situation. The other thing that I'll often recommend, I know you're going to have, I think, Dr. Aaron on in the near future, who does some of the mixing of mupirocin into moisturizer. I will often have people mix either some clotrimazole or miconazole. So those are over-the-counter anti-yeast ingredients that I'll have people mix in with their moisturizer or their steroid. So that I see the question coming in: how to cure Malassezia around the mouth and eyes without steroids. First, if I had a great answer for that, I could think about 10 of my own patients who would be really mad at me that I hadn't told them, because we've tried lots of different things. Really the best advice that I have right now for dealing with Malassezia, the topical anti-yeast ingredients. I do think that apple cider vinegar can be very helpful. There was just some research about 3 weeks ago, got published for the first time, that witch hazel has some very good anti-inflammatory effects. I've had a few people try it now. I was really worried that it was going to really burn and sting when they put it on, but it didn't. And so I would probably try. So I've had some of my patients try these, and it's been hit or miss. But if I had a great answer, I would give it to you. Apple cider vinegar and witch hazel are two kind of very natural, very safe things that can be worth trying beyond using the over-the-counter clotrimazole or miconazole, which are anti-yeast ingredients. And then I'll also say there's a new medication, a new cream out. And I do work with all the drug companies, but there's a new cream out called Zoryve, Zoryve. It's right now, it is only FDA approved in America for psoriasis, but they have done studies with both atopic dermatitis and seborrheic dermatitis. It's a good psoriasis treatment. It's a good atopic dermatitis treatment. It is a great treatment for seborrheic dermatitis and for Malassezia-driven atopic dermatitis, because it's both. So just the way that this Zoryve works, I'm sure a lot of your listeners and viewers are familiar with Eucrisa. So it is the same general mechanism as Eucrisa, except it doesn't cause any of the burning that Eucrisa causes in most people. It's much more potent than Eucrisa, and it has very potent anti-Malassezia effects. Now, it is ludicrously expensive. It's new. So, there's always hasn't been out that long. Maybe but if I had that available to me, once I'm able to prescribe that for atopic dermatitis or seborrheic dermatitis, I will be recommending it to my patients who I think have Malassezia-driven disease.
I appreciate that you share both sides, Dr. Zirwas, because I know some people have tried the very natural approach and it hasn't worked. And I know some people are really suffering out there. And so I know that sometimes some people do have to turn to medication in the meantime just to get relief. So I understand both points of views, and I really appreciate that you shared both in case some people really need that extra relief and they're just suffering a lot or really depressed. And I've met people who are suicidal as well. So it's tough.
I'll tell you one other thing that I was thinking about as you were saying that I will often do. There's an old generic medication, not old, but a generic medication called tacrolimus. Protopic was its original name years ago. Most of your listeners are probably familiar with it. What's nice about it, it's a non-steroid, so it's safe to use on the face. I have people mix it together, so one half that and half an anti-yeast cream like ketoconazole or clotrimazole or miconazole. I'll have them do a 1-to-1 mix it together, and then put that on and do that once a day, so that the tacrolimus you think of as an anti-inflammatory, and you think of the anti-yeast that you're mixing in as helping to address the Malassezia aspect of it. Again, it may be worth the tacrolimus is prescription only, so you certainly would have to talk to your dermatologist about it. But I do that pretty regularly as well.
Thank you for sharing that. We had one more question. I'm seeing that face mists help to keep the skin moisturized too, but
I love this. All right. So glad that we got to ask this. There is, and again, I have no connection with this product. There's a product out there called Skin Smart Eczema Spray.
I've used that before.
Yes, I love that stuff. So Skin Smart Eczema Spray, and first I'm going to say, in some people it's like a miracle, and other people it doesn't do much at all, right? So it's everybody's body is different. Skin Smart Eczema Spray is based on hypochlorous acid. So hypochlorous acid is the component of bleach that makes bleach, very dilute bleach, sometimes helpful. Now, the problem with very dilute bleach is that the beneficial effect of the hypochlorous acid is usually offset by the irritating effect of the bleach. The hypochlorous acid is totally non-irritating. And so the Skin Smart Eczema Spray, for a lot of my Malassezia patients and for a lot of my regular eczema patients, I will have them use it a couple of times a day as a mist. And it smells a little bit like swimming pool water. It's not a strong chlorine smell, but it's got a little bit of a chlorine smell, but it's very non-irritating. And I've had it be really, I've had a number of patients that it's been really dramatically effective for, and you can get it on Amazon. It's about $12, I think, for a 4-ounce bottle, which lasts you for a pretty long while. That is probably my favorite eczema psoriasis friendly mist.
And I actually asked the company, because a lot of nurses always ask, like, is there some sort of disinfectant or spray that doesn't dry out their skin? So I asked them if it can be used as a disinfectant, and they said it can. So I thought that was cool.
Yes, and it is very relatively controversial, right? So anytime you ask a company anything, there's a
That is true.
I do think it has antiseptic, antimicrobial effects. I absolutely agree with that, but it's not something where I'm like, yep, I agree completely. Yes, definitely. I'm like, yeah, I think it does, but I'm not sure. One other thing that's worth mentioning there for nurses, hand sanitizer. If you look for alcohol-free hand sanitizer, the active ingredient that you want is something called benzalkonium chloride. And there are several lotion hand sanitizers that have benzalkonium chloride. And so that way you don't have to wash your hands, which dries them and removes the natural oil. And you don't have to put the alcohol-based hand sanitizer on that stings and burns so bad. So if you go on Google, on Amazon or Google and search alcohol-free hand sanitizer, or you can do benzalkonium chloride hand sanitizer. Either one of those are really good for nurses who hand sanitizer really sting. If they've got hand eczema, the alcohol-based ones really sting like crazy.
Thank you. And someone asks, how cool would this hypochlorous acid mist be nice for the scalp area too?
So yes, I do use it there occasionally. I actually like witch hazel better. Witch hazel is probably my favorite thing for the scalp. I'm using more and more witch hazel ever since that study just came out recently. I've had a couple of patients over the years who have actually told me, hey, man, I started using witch hazel. It's made such a big difference for me. And I'd always been like, well, okay, anything could work for anybody. Right now, the study has come out that now I'm like, oh, those patients were really onto something. So I like witch hazel for the scalp a lot also. I do use the spray for the scalp also, though.
Someone also says, Skin Smart Eczema Mist. Wow, thank you. I will share a story that my baby, he's 7 months. He started getting eczema patches when we started feeding him solids. And so his face was getting so bad, like really, really bad. So we're doing a lot of other things like internally and supplements as well. But I started doing the hypochlorous acid from a different company. But we put it on and his skin is like clear now. So I don't know if it's that or everything we're doing together, but
Right. That's always the problem is ferreting out like what is, because you know, when your kid is suffering, you don't want to be like, let's try this one thing for a month and we'll see if it works. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, it's been a month. Let's try this one thing for a month. You try everything, and then all you want is for them to get better. Then you don't know which thing it was, but you don't care that much. They're better.
Yeah,
right?
for
They're
sure.
better.
So we have a lot of questions, and I know we have to head off soon, so we'll end soon. But someone asked, does bleach bath help with malassezia around the mouth?
My opinion on this is no. And my general opinion, and Dr. Silverberg actually was the one who published the study looking at this. I don't believe in bleach baths. The Dr. Silverberg did a thing called a meta-analysis where you look at all of the studies that have ever looked at bleach baths. And the summary was that bleach baths on average don't help. So I've seen patients that bleach baths are amazing for, but overall the data, and this goes with my experience, the vast majority of people, bleach baths are not helpful. Now for some people they are. So if you're doing bleach baths and they have really made a difference for you, I'm not telling you to stop, but I'm just saying for most people, bleach baths don't do much.
Is there new research on this that we can share?
I haven't seen any great kind of new studies on it. It was more the meta-analysis that Dr. Silverberg did. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 studies that have been done. And so you take all the results with them and you do this statistical wizardry that Dr. Silverberg is much smarter than me and can do. You put all the different studies together and it tells you, does something work or not? And his conclusion was that they don't work. It was an interesting thing because Dr. Silverberg at the time was working at Northwestern University, and the head of dermatology at Northwestern University is Dr. Amy Paller, who is she was actually the person who came up with the idea of bleach baths. And so it was very controversial when like one of her employees came out with bleach baths don't work. And so it's a real interest. There's a lot of controversy about this in the world of dermatology. Pediatric dermatologists are much more pro bleach bath. than our adult dermatologist. I will tell you what I like to have people put in the bath water is actually apple cider vinegar. So I have people put about a half a cup of apple cider vinegar in the bath water. The idea being we know that low pH, so slightly acidifying the water, that is very healthy for skin, because one of the abnormalities in skin in eczema is that your skin is not acidic enough. And so adding a little bit of acid, and not right half a cup that your kid doesn't, the child doesn't even know it's in there. It doesn't sting. It doesn't hurt. So I usually do the vinegar baths rather than the bleach baths.
That's great. And thanks for sharing that. I used to do that too, and I liked it. I put a
Yeah.
bunch of other things in it as well. Someone said their daughter's symptoms worsen when they're in the pool, which I guess is can be due to the chlorine.
And it's both directions. I see some people who swimming in summer, their eczema gets much better. I see other people who swimming in summer, their eczema gets much worse. We still don't have a great, there's a lot of different things coming, because usually if you're swimming, you're getting sun. How much chlorine is in the water? Is it chlorinated or brominated? There's lots of different things that kind of go into that. So I see it go both ways.
Very multifactorial.
Yes.
Someone says, can the eczema mist be used on a 5-month-old baby?
So I believe the answer is yes. So let me put it this way. If I had a 5-month-old baby, I would not have any concern about putting it on them.
I actually asked the company of I'm using a Tower 28, I think, the SOS spray. And I asked the company, they said there's no research, but they've had a lot of customers that have used it for babies.
Yeah,
So,
I can't think of any reason because you can squirt the stuff in your eye and it doesn't sting. And I have actually tried that. So anytime a company says safe for the years, I have sprayed many things in my eye to see if it actually stings or not. And that stuff didn't, and the Skin Smart spray at least didn't, it was fine when I sprayed it in my eye.
I'm glad that you tested it for us. Thank you, Dr. Zires.
A couple of times I've done that with like unlabeled products where a company was like, here, and I don't even know what's in it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to put it. And then afterwards I was like, oh my God, what if I had just gone blind?
All right, last question. Okay. We know that prebiotics like chicory that are rich in inulin feed our good bacteria, but there's research showing that pesticides kill our good bacteria. So how to solve this dilemma?
It is a fascinating question. And I think about this all the time. So first I will tell you, I take probiotics, of course. I do not take any prebiotics. Well, I do. I take fiber every day. So I take psyllium husk. I don't know, right? So my answer with that is always take the best answer I've got, and the only thing that I have real data to support is taking a probiotic, so that even if we're killing stuff off with the pesticides, the antibiotics and meat, whatever, we're trying to replace it with the good bacteria that we're taking every day in the probiotic.
Thank you for sharing. I just had to laugh at this comment. Someone said you sprayed mist in your eyes. You're brave. Thank you for taking the hit for us. Ha 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 ha.
Hey, if I'm going to tell a patient something, if I can test it on myself first, I'm going to test it on myself first, right? That just makes, again, that makes sense. That's what I want my doctor to do. Before they were like, hey, do this. If I'd be like, are you sure? Would you do it to yourself? That's always okay. Let's see.
It looks like we have one more that came in, and maybe this will be the last one, because says that I have a saltwater pool and my daughter's face is less flared after she swims. Is it because of the salt?
Don't know. Again, I've heard this before, and I've had a lot of patients tell me that, swimming if they go to the beach and swim in the ocean, it is dramatically effective for their eczema. And even in some Scandinavian countries, insurance, which the government is the insurance company, will actually pay for people with eczema to go to the Canary Islands, I think for 2 weeks every summer, because the effect of salt water and sun combined has been so dramatic in lots and lots of people. So I would, if it's an indoor pool, then what I'm saying, it might be baloney. But I actually believe it's the combination of salt water and sun that is so dramatically effective.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, that marks the end of all our questions. And I don't think I've ever had so many questions come in. So people just kept asking because they were so interested in what you're sharing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, this has been so much fun. It's so much fun to talk to somebody who's so educated around eczema and also puts it together in the context of having lived with it, and to get to interact with such a well-educated, intelligent listener base. This has really just been a ball. So thank you for having me on. I really had a good time and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And someone says, "Thank you, doctor." And yeah, we just really appreciated that you are here today. And I think this is also my longest podcast that I've had, but it was really fun. And I had a lot of, even had a funny comment. So always a blast when we have a listener base who's really interested and just very knowledgeable and interested in learning more as well.
So thanks, Abby. And all right, I gotta go. I got a meeting at 5 o'clock. So I got 2 minutes to log off with you and get on with them. So,
Okay, well, thank you so
all
much.
right.
It was really nice having you. Take care and bye, everyone.
Yep, bye.